Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and today I want to talk about 3.24, my experience with it in the Evocati last week, and why I think some of you out there are probably going to really love and maybe also possibly hate patch 3.24. And before we kick things off here folks, I do want to give a big shout out to newest channel member NJ Wetsu. Thank you so much and welcome to the crew. Let's get started. First and foremost, if this is the first time you're watching one of my Evocati breakdown videos, of course, I'm not allowed to show you anything from the Evocati test builds that I played. I can only talk about it, so everything you're going to see in the background here has nothing to do with 3.24. It is instead me and members of my organization, the Forgotten Heralds, practicing naval combat. So something cool you guys can watch in the background, or you can completely ignore it and just put me on in the background and listen to my dulcet tones as sort of a podcast. Either way, let's go ahead and kick things off. And the first thing I want to talk about in 3.24 is, well, what's in it? Well, the biggest change, of course, is inventory and the cargo overhaul. So what that means is no more magical bag of holding style inventories around stations and outposts. Even just the act of loading up your character now is a two-step process. The first step involves you, of course, purchasing your equipment like we're always used to, and then locating an inventory kiosk, also known as an item bank, dotted around stations and landing zones. You then need to find the items you want in that kiosk, which is a representation of your storage at that location. You then have to find them via filters on the UI and add them to the drawer. Then you open the drawer and retrieve the items like you're used to. It opens the paper doll inventory management system that we're used to. It's just you have to do them now at item banks. Now, obviously, just from my description alone, you could already tell it is far more complicated than the old system, right? All you had to do before is you would go to the store, you would buy your items. Once you've bought the items, you hit the I key to open your inventory, and then you drag and drop the items onto your character, and then off you went. Now, there's more steps involved. And it's more complicated right now, even more so because there's no search functionality on those kiosks right now, so hopefully COG will add that in. Otherwise, this is going to be an even bigger pain point than probably I'm already describing. One that they absolutely have to address. It's just in my opinion, they have to address that. Otherwise, it's just an unnecessary headache looking for what you want by cycling through these kind of toggle on and off filters, and it's very tedious. So if they add a search function, it would be a lot better. I'd like to, for example, search for all my orc armor or search for all my max flex armor or something like that, right? I'd like to be able to do that instantly rather than having to do a filter toggle and then have to find and cycle through all the individual items and then try to find the one I want. It's better if they have a search option. I really hope they do that. So overall, how do I feel about it? Really, right now, currently, I don't mind. This will make gearing up take a lot more time than usual, but it's really nothing new other than really just losing the magical bag of holding inventory where we had at landing sites currently, right? And the reason why I don't mind it too much is it's a big improvement. I mean, honestly, it's a big improvement for me personally. And the reason why is players can no longer just store stuff at outposts or points of interest or landing sites, for example, like Jumptown. And one annoying issue I would run into with ground PvP at Jumptown was that local inventory, that magical inventory. It was so annoying holding the ground at Jumptown, and then a player maybe would come in a solo ship, maybe they would eject, or they would come from far away, and they would run, and it would be annoying seeing them out in the open, chase them, and then they would turn a corner, and all of a sudden they would come back around that corner with heavy armor and weapons because they had gear already stored at Jumptown. And it was so frustrating dealing with that all the time. Now, that's not a use case everybody else deals with, but it is kind of a thing that gets tamped down by this system. You can no longer just have magical inventory to switch your kit on the fly, right? If you're, for example, defending a point of interest, let's say you're trying to defend, I don't know, Gillette Family Farms, right? And you store railguns there and players start flying. Now you could just pull railguns and ammo out of the magical bag of inventory that's there and you could constantly shoot other players down, right? This is a thing that actually would happen. Now, again, not very common, but it was a thing that actually happened. And this, again, like I said, tamps down on that. You still can, because at trade points of interest, you still can access warehouses and stuff, but it's a far more involved and complicated system than it was before where you just hit I and you drag stuff into your character and then you were good to go again, right? Now, if you want to do any of that stuff, especially at Jumptown, you have to bring a physical box that can store your gear, or, you know, you kit up ahead of time, make sure that everything is good, and then you put it onto a local ship, and that ship, maybe if it's another player, comes and brings that equipment to you, right? There's a lot more steps involved for logistics there for any type of involved PvP or just really anything in general. There's going to be some level of logistics there now. And while this does limit some cheese, this also limits how quickly you can transfer items to any location. So for example, let's say you want to move tons of armors and weapons that you just scooped up from your last bunker run. You can no longer just enter the armistice zone of your favorite landing site or orbital station and just offload them to the magical bag of holding that was that local inventory. Now you have to physically land and either deposit those items individually to the new warehouse elevator, which we'll talk about more about later, or you have to put them in cargo containers and then deposit that container into the warehouse to be stored for later use. So, okay, why the extra complication? The reason is, of course, a level of believability, tactileness, but also more importantly, time investment. CIG wants everything to have some cost tied to it, including the time you invest actually getting things done. This raises the stakes for potential losses and also creates more interaction within the world. And let me give you a quick example of that. In the current builds, I never buy food whatsoever. I have no need to. I could just go to any trade post, loot the crates inside, and take the food, water, and armor and store them locally. Then I move back to my ship and transfer them instantly and leave, all with minimal interaction. Now with this system, I would need a backpack or crate to move items, especially armor pieces that I find. This cumbersome system can lead to more interesting interactions with players. For example, someone could try to steal my box of items I'm moving around. After all, they're seeing someone move around a nice juicy container back and forth, wondering what's inside. This will also lead to something else that's a little bit more interesting for future game mechanics, which includes the suit holder mechanics for future builds where players will not want to walk around all the time with their armor and undersuits on all the time. Remember that CIG in the future does want to actually include hygiene as a stat that you can actually have that would affect your reputation if it's negative, of course, right? Assuming you even care. So other than instantly materializing equipment on your character at any location on the ship, you're instead going to want to move to your quarters or any location that stores your suit and equipment and gear up there. Now, you may say, well, then in that case, I'll just leave my equipment on the floor near my station or my pilot seat or wherever. If I need it, I'll just pick it up there. Sure. However, remember at some point CIG will be expanding force reactions in the future beyond just players getting pushed or knocked around when the ship gets bumped into stuff, gets hit, or pulls a lot of Gs in a short period of time. Items on the ship will also eventually get jostled around as well, so anytime you take a big impact or you start pulling Gs really hard, say goodbye to that armor and weapons that just got thrown around due to it not being locked down. So this is in preparation for a lot of these future mechanics, much like how we saw the big reduction in ship inventories for storing items in previous patches. And in return, we saw ships get more personal inventory lockers that are usable. And this will continue to expand out to more ships with 3.24. Now initially, this will make something like eating or drinking a bit more awkward since you may not necessarily have a backpack in the moment and you don't really want to drop your equipment on the ground. Normally you could just open your inventory and drag and drop your helmet into that major inventory, whatever is there, whether it's your ship or the landing site or station, whatever it is, and then eat or drink and then put that helmet back on. But because it's a little bit more complicated, CIG has added the helmet remove on and off key toggle. I believe the key is N or Alt N, I don't remember off the top of my head, but you can use that to remove your helmet temporarily and then hit it again to put it back on. So if you need to drink, you hit that key, drink, and then hit the key to put the helmet back on again. It's very simple. Okay, so the real question is, what does this do to the overall game in terms of how we play? What are the actual ramifications here? Well, to be honest, not a whole lot yet. The main change is just the convenience of having the magical inventories being reduced to localized kiosks, ship lockers, and crates to swap kit in and out. My main concern is server performance. If the server suffers, then these kiosks are going to be an absolute nightmare to use. As we all know, server performance makes everything far less enjoyable in the game, and this will probably be no exception. If the server is struggling, then this will probably be an incredibly rage-inducing feature since the added complexity will feel more like a chore rather than an integral part of the gameplay experience. Luckily in my play sessions, this was not really an issue, but then again, Evocati doesn't have the same population level as the PTU or even live, so it's difficult to say how things will actually turn out when this thing actually gets more players' hands in it. But past experience will probably dictate that this will be a major pinch point with server-related issues. That, and like I said previously, they really need to add a search function to the item banks, but it's unclear if they're actually going to add one. After all, we never got one for our own inventories, our magical bag of holding inventories, despite people asking for one for so long. And I hope that was due to them being busy working on this new system and not just because they simply refused to add one, because, I mean, these are quality of life things that should be in any game, so the fact that it's not in Star Citizen already is just a head scratcher. I mean, $700 million, guys. And the second and arguably even bigger addition is the change to ship cargo and how players interact with it. Previously, you would just simply buy items at a trade kiosk and have it instantly teleported to your ship's cargo grid. Now, there's an option to either have it transferred automatically with a fee and some time, or you can transfer it yourself, manually foregoing those fees. Now, in my testing, the automated transfer was insanely long. Filling up my raft was going to take about 45 minutes, and for about 32 SCU containers for my C2, the estimated time was 5 hours. Now, let's be honest, folks, I don't suspect that these will be the final value, since even to me, at least in my opinion, this seems pretty egregious. And of course, this is still in the testing and feedback stage, so things can and will change, of course, but we'll have to wait and see how it shakes out. If they somehow decide this is going to stay, then they really need to upgrade the profit range for trading then, because that is insane. I mean, I'm just going to leave that out there right now. And you of course can opt to load the cargo manually using the warehouse elevators to move the cargo. This will involve the need of a tractor beam or one of the new trolleys, like the hover trolleys they added to the game. I had some issues here finding one of the new hover carts. It was basically next to impossible. They were not at the locations that they were supposed to be sold at, which was like the Dumpers Depot and stuff like that. They were just not there for sale, even though the patch notes said that they were for sale there. So I think CIG just maybe, there's an oversight there. They forgot to add them, or maybe there's a bug. I don't know, but didn't get a chance to try them out quite yet. What was a fun change with this new hangar and cargo warehouse was the access to hangar flare and the new flare you can buy for your personal hangar. So items you can buy included manufacturer-specific pilot chairs, as well as dining tables and dining chairs. And a new improvement to the cargo overall added more functional snapping to cargo grids. This means that you can snap these like new chairs, for example, that you bought, and even ship weapons and components now can snap to cargo grids, which is a really nice change. One I suspect many salvagers are going to be happy to hear about. And I think one of the funniest changes about this, so you guys remember if you watch any of my multi-crew stuff, one of the things a big critique I had was there's not enough ships out there in game that have a proper commander's or captain's chair, right? Except for some very strange MISC ships that have it for some reason. Don't know why, but they do. And one of the things that bugged me about it is I would like to see more of that. And what was hilarious is that the new chairs you could buy, the new pilot specific or pilot manufacturer specific chairs, correct myself there, you can actually take those with a tractor beam and put them onto your ship. And one thing I tried is I bought an Aegis Dynamics pilot chair, took it into my hangar where my hammerhead was, and put it into the bridge of my hammerhead as almost like a captain's chair. And what's incredible is anywhere you put it down, it's actually usable. You can get in it. And that gave me a chuckle. So now I can sit there and pretend I'm the captain of the ship. Of course, you don't get MFDs, you don't get radar contacts, you get nothing. So it's absolutely worthless. But it did give me a chuckle that you could actually do that. And what's going to be interesting is you're going to be able to decorate your ships with all this kind of cool stuff you can buy, including your hangar flare like you did in the past, right? But it's one thing that just really kind of sparked my interest, because now I'm interested in just buying a bunch of chairs and using them as barricades within my ship for PvP combat inside a ship. I'm just kind of curious how that's going to work out. So yeah, just very, very interesting. It gave me a chuckle, and I just kind of want to leave that there for y'all. Overall, this will make loading ships more immersive, but again, some folks are probably not going to like this since it no longer is that instant gamey teleport system for cargo, right? This system for manual or auto loading cargo will also exist for ground trading outposts as well. Now, I didn't get to test them out yet since I was mostly fiddling around with inventory and cargo in the hangars during these Evocati builds. So I do look forward to doing some trading as a bit of a test in the background this week as we get new Evo patches and things start to stabilize a lot more. And now this leads me to the personal hangars, and this one had the most issues for me at least, but it was still pretty cool to see in action regardless. Currently, you just call up a ship and it just gives you a hangar appropriate to the size of the ship you called if there is one even open. Now we have personal hangars that are sized small, medium, large, and extra large. And when you call a hangar elevator at a starport or spaceport, you'll get a button on the elevator panel to go directly to your hangar. When you get a personal hangar, it will be the largest size that fits the biggest ship in your fleet. This includes loaners, but not any JPEGs you own. For example, if you say own an Idris, right, you won't get the extra large hangar. You'll only get whatever the loaner is, whatever the equivalent of that is. So if you own any of the big boy ships and you notice you have a smaller hangar, that's by design. You're not going to automatically be given the bigger hangar just because you own a JPEG that doesn't exist in game yet. It only is of the current ships in your fleet that are in game. The personal hangar has terminals to access the cargo elevator for the warehouse, as well as it has its own ASOP terminals for calling your ship inside the hangar. These hangars are also instanced, so they sit on top of each other, which led to some really weird bugs for us in testing, such as audio bugs from other hangars. We could just hear other hangars and other players doing stuff. We could hear other players accessing their ASOP terminals, and it led to just like weird nonsense and weird bugs going on, as you could hear people fiddling with their ASOPs, and it also would mess with your own ASOP at the same time. It was very strange. Hopefully they can clear that up before it goes live, of course. But beyond that, the hangar was actually really an impressive sight to see. Right now, the hangars are pretty much the same that we're used to in-game, but now they have some cool animated floors, and they swapped out some of the extra side panels for the aforementioned cargo elevators. And the animation of watching your ship come and go, as you call them, is actually quite impressive. I quite enjoy it. The lights change, there's a whole change, there's like an alarm that blares and stuff like that. And overall, it's just a really cool sight to see, and it just kind of makes me envious of new players, like what that experience would be of first entering your hangar and then watching your ship lift up from the ground as it comes from storage and then is placed in and it's ready for you to go. I'm envious of you if you're a newer or even a returning player that hasn't played in a long time, and I'm just very envious of that. So currently we have just the Southland and Aero View hangar, so no Revel in York just yet, and that's pretty much it. That's all we have. It lacks any of the detail from the really old hangar modules we used to have, so no upper offices, no gantries or lofts or anything. It's just the same old hangars that we've had before, with the ability for us to now store items in it and maybe some other cool additions as well. Now, of course, this is just an early implementation, as I suspect CIG will give us a lot more in the future, at least I hope they do. I would really like to see a new coat of paint on the old hangars we had back in the day, with the offices and upper terraces and whatnot, and just a nice place for me to store my hangar flare, but I suspect this will probably be later, maybe, hopefully, we'll see. We'll have to hear from CIG and see what they say on that, if at all anything. Once you have your ship ready, you call ATC like normal, and you have to wait for there to be a suitable opening. Once the game determines there's an empty space to open up, it will teleport your hangar to that spot in the world, which it will then open the doors, and then you can leave. This introduces a new queuing system. If other hangars are currently in use, you may have to wait in a queue before the hangar is teleported and you can leave. This makes me scratch my head a little bit because a lot of the landing sites currently have dummy hangars, where they're basically non-functioning hangars, they're just there for looks. But it looks like this new system is still using the existing hangar slots. And this could lead to large queue times like I experienced in Evocati when some of our builds went live. We had a lot of players spawn in the same area, for example, Area 18, and some of my queue times were actually very long as players were fiddling with their hangars and they were waiting a long time, and it just was kind of a bit of a mess. I can only imagine the nightmare this might bring when it goes live and everybody is reset back to their home location. So hopefully CIG can account for this. Maybe they're already working on improvements for this, I don't know, but this is definitely an issue because it was really annoying getting into my ship, calling the hangar, and then waiting in a really long queue as players were taking their sweet time getting out of their hangars. This also leaves a big question in the air. While undoubtedly this is an early implementation, we still have no word from CIG on how hangars will be awarded out. Right now, if you set your home to New Babbage or Orison, you'll get the AeroView hangars, and if you set your home to Area 18 or Lorville, you'll get the Southland hangars, regardless if you own that hangar type or not. And as mentioned, the Revel in York hangar is not a thing in-game either. Another thing I noticed is that the hangar follows you to the spaceports as well, or at least the Southland one does, and it does not necessarily mirror the one you have at home despite having the same functionality. So does this mean the hangars offered as part of game packages are just not a thing anymore? Or is that going to change somehow now that we have this in-game? CIG will have to let the players know, otherwise there can be some conflict with the sale of game packages and what you actually see in-game, because remember, when you buy a game package, it also gives you a specific hangar as part of that package as well. Another issue is that cargo elevators currently do not spawn ground vehicles. This is because you will have to spawn the ground vehicle on the pad, move it, and then spawn the ship you want the vehicle to go into, and then move the vehicle inside. It is pretty cumbersome, but to my understanding this will not be final, as later iterations of this system will allow us to spawn vehicles in the cargo elevators. One other feature we did lose from the old hangars was the ability to display multiple ships. For owners of the bigger hangars back in the day, you could spawn in multiple ships in your hangar and display them. Now you really can't do that. I think some people were trying it where they were trying to spawn their ship, move it to the side, and then spawn another ship, but the game would just despawn the original ship anyway. And I suspect this is probably due to server performance or just general client performance reasons, but I can't be for certain on that. Again, maybe this will change later, but we'll have to see. So overall, I think these are interesting changes coming down the pipe. And as mentioned, probably will annoy some people, particularly with the item banks for personal inventory. Logistically, this can slow things down for everyone, including organized groups, as the process of loading and unloading equipment and cargo is now much more complicated. This additional time investment means that losses either due to pilot error or any other factor will sting even more. And this also means bugs will sting even more as well. And of course, this is by design, not the bugs at least. CIG wants some stakes involved with something like cargo. Before, it was just monetary investment, which if you lost in a haul was bad in of itself, but now if you lose a haul, you not only lose the cargo and money, but you also lost that time you invested, which can be a really big morale killer. And I will say this, like I've said in the past, folks, if you want to haul by yourself in a multi-crew ship, you are already going to be a victim if you are unlucky out there. You just don't realize it yet. Sooner or later, your risk will bite you in the butt. So take some advice and bring some friends. Don't have any? Find some. ForgottenHeralds.org, folks. Apply today. So, I don't begrudge anybody who may feel put off by this update when it arrives. However, like I've said time and time again, folks, as we get new tech and new toys from CIG, we are inching closer and closer to a much more difficult game. Remember that CIG really wants Star Citizen to straddle the line between simulation and casual. And with this new change, that moves the needle closer to simulation, making the game much more challenging and even more time-consuming. The cost of doing business will now also have to factor the time that was involved. And to close it out, I want to talk about time sinks, which people have already been saying that this game is now not respecting players' times. Many games have varying degrees of time sinks, the most common being literal timers. Not too dissimilar to cargo timers we're seeing now, but there are other time sinks as well, such as, gear farming, organizing a raid, or even completing missions in a single-player game to unlock rewards. But regardless of the implementation, time sinks in the game world can be both bad or good. It really depends on if you, the player, like it as part of the game loop or not. A mobile game, for example, that wastes your time with timers in order to get you to pay real-world money to skip the timer is considered by many core gamers to be a bad time sink. On the flip side, in a more hardcore game like DayZ or Scum, you may have to travel long distances, possibly on foot across the map, to find decent gear at certain locations or to look for a fight at another player's base. It is part of the game's core loop, and many, I would hazard a guess, would probably agree that this is a fine time sink if in fact they even realized it was a time sink to begin with the only ones disagreeing are the ones that would prefer the action to be either more immediate or are just simply not fans of losing their gear altogether when they die. Now, I'm sure your parents at one point were saying that video games are a time waster, right? And I'm assuming you probably disagreed with them since we're all here to begin with, right? The point is that not everybody is going to view this feature as a time waster that is going to kill the game, for example. Especially newer players that don't have the prior context of how the game used to be. To them, it's just all part of the gameplay loop that the game offers. Star Citizen over time is developing more and more into a hardcore game. I've heard people describe it as being Tarkov or DayZ in space, and the similarities are there, so I can understand the comparison. Hardcore games demand a certain level of commitment from the player, if they intend to at least make some level of progress. Much like DayZ, for example, causes you to lose your gear if you die, then you will have to do the whole loot run over again to recover back where you were. All the while, you could be killed again at a moment's notice and have to start over yet again. Talk about a gameplay loop that doesn't respect your time, right? But that's the point. The stakes are high, and therefore the adrenaline rush and the dopamine hits are what players are after, ignoring the downtime in between the fights. Now, my problem is that Star Citizen is lacking meaningful progression. We still have a very basic reputation system, and all of our contracts just pay money, which you can use to buy ships, components, and FPS gear, which is great, but once you have a ton of cash on hand, you really are not compelled to do anything else. We are still some time away before we can see a really fleshed out reputation system and contracts that could potentially pay out with equipment as well as cash. But until then, if you are a player that simply spent a lot of real world money on ships in this game and have an extensive fleet, these changes are probably going to feel more painful for you because you basically already bypassed what little gameplay there is, and therefore won't want to engage with these changes to the core gameplay loops because they're just getting in your way. If you're a newer player or a player with little to start with, this will be a whole new world to explore, with a tactile and realistic trading system and inventory management system that you've never seen in any other game to date. And I think CIG is banking on those players staying around longer than the old heads. Right now, folks, I'm not against or for these changes currently, as for one, I'm not a cargo hauler, nor do I care how long it takes to equip my character. I already took a long time getting my loadouts built as it is, and I don't really mind the time spent in my hangar getting things ready. I really would just like to see the hangars far more fleshed out than they are currently. And more importantly though, let me make this clear. I did not have enough time to really try these changes out in detail to even make up my mind. Indeed, everybody in Evocati did not have much time with these last two builds we had because they were incredibly buggy, with loads of server crashes and account breaking issues that required recopying, and the game just generally falling apart, which is very common for early Evocati builds. That's why I think some people are probably jumping the gun here a little bit too early on this. We have to really see how things shake out before real ideal feedback comes in and we can really see how the loops actually come together. But we just need to wait for CIG to give us more stable builds. Hopefully, as this week trudges on, we'll get a clearer picture of how things really are as the builds stabilize, and we'll have more time to sink our teeth into it. So if you want to hear my additional feedback as the weeks progress on and we trudge towards 3.24, be sure to join my Discord and I'll have some play-by-plays written out each time I play, and if you have questions, I can answer them there directly. Alright folks, that's it for me today, talking about 3.24 and what we can expect to see and my personal experiences within that build. If you did indeed enjoy this video, please leave a like as it really does help out the channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this and much more down the line, be sure to subscribe as well. And of course, if you enjoy the work I do here and you want to support the channel, consider becoming a channel member like these fine folks here. Their contributions are invaluable for helping me put these videos together. But until next time, folks, fly safe, and I'll see you all in the black.
Can we keep them getting left? Kids are running away, I think. Nice, good kill.